So I was, hi there, Mark. So I was,
Hey, Paul.
yeah, hi there. You remember that video where Eric Ozzie was trying to sort out his passport, looking for a bit of advice and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I finished off with a joke, to which I got a nice retaliation, and to which I then set another joke. So I'll just quickly go through them again because they were quite good.
Okay.
The first one was, obviously we've got a few folk singers out there that have done songs about the case. So I put, well, how many folk singers does it take to change a light bulb? The answer, 21. 1 to change the light bulb, 20 to sing about how good the old one was. Now, the next one was this, and it was somebody replied with, well, how many Scotsmen does it take to change a light bulb? And I asked one of my pupils yesterday about this, and he goes, change a light bulb? Why would you want to do that? And it was basically the same answer. None. We would rather not spend money on a light if we don't have to, It's not. So then we got onto the subject of, I put this question at the end, and I put, what is the difference between a weasel and a stoat?
And a what?
A stoat. A weasel and a stoat.
What's a stoat?
A stoat. Right, okay, here we go. The difference between a weasel and a stoat is that a weasel is weaselly recognised and a stoat is totally different.
Oh, God.
they're little like ferret type
Dad jokes.
I know.
Ferret type creatures, did you say?
Ferret type creatures, yeah. A stoat.
Right.
They're common. They're common in the UK. Ferrets, stoats, and weasels. They're all the little sort of
rodents.
Furry rodents. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Talk about joke. I love that setup of the dude. Where's the money, Zabowski? Where's the money?
Yeah.
Oh dear. So anyway, I've got some news for you.
Good. I love news.
The good news is, yes. The good news is Eric Ozzie has decided not to come to Australia after all. The reason being, no Dr. Pepper. They don't have it in Australia.
No, well, I can't say I've seen it. I suspect there's probably some boutique place you might, underground drinking place that might have it, but it's certainly not common here. Although we're aware of it because it's sort of iconic from an American pop culture point of view. So, but no, can't say I see it in a regular store.
No, well, I sent him the article about the fact that it was banned because of the level, really? Not the level of sugar, but the level of caffeine in it. And of course,
and that probably is impacted by how it's promoted as a drink. So, if it's promoted as a soft drink and it has caffeine in it, then it wouldn't be allowed because it appeals to younger children or younger people. And if it was promoted as a pick me up, I can stay awake for 24 hours type drink like Red Bull, it probably would be permitted. So that was probably what the problem was.
But then he went on a huge, almighty rant.
Really? That's not like him.
I honestly, I think he loves it when he's got something to have a rant about, And isn't it weird how when it comes to making a murderer, Scott Davis, all the other stuff, wrongful convictions, he's actually very, very lucid. He's got a good opinion, a good awareness of it. But when it comes to anything else, he is totally deluded.
Well, he's obviously accumulated all his neurons into a few subjects.
Yes.
And that's why they're so good at those, making a murderer. But, outside of those, there's nothing left to contribute to other aspects of life. So I'm sure he struggles, getting mail from the postman each morning. But, we should be grateful for what we have, half glass full approach, rather
Yes.
than what we don't have with him. That's the way I look at him. Half
Sure.
glass full.
Yeah.
Big glass, by the way, but half glass full. Size 20 glass. Actually.
Yes. So yes, he went on a bit of a rant about the formula being changed, and about Big Brother is demanding that formulas for drinks should be changed. And I kind of suggested, well, yeah, I think that's actually quite a good thing. I mean, here in Scotland, obviously, we have our iconic soft drink, which is Iron Brew. It's Scotland is the only country in the world where cola is not the #1 soft drink. It's Iron Brew. And again, the recipe had to change. If there was so much sugar in it, the number of kids that were drinking Iron Brew, and they could trace it directly to the Iron Brew they were drinking, teeth just rotting away as youngsters, so they had to change the formula. Certainly myself, I used to drink when I was in my 20s. I used to drink Coca-Cola until somebody pointed out, they said, you do realize how much sugar's in there? It's like 12 teaspoons of sugar. Can you imagine having a like a coffee and putting 12 sugars in there?
Oh,
you wouldn't do it, would you?
No.
Would you?
In fact, no. In fact, I don't have any added sugar into anything. I'm not trying to be a saint, but I don't. And I drink Diet Coke or Coke Zero or the Pepsi equivalent of that.
Yeah.
Which I quite like. But if for some reason I happen to drink a full strength Coke or Pepsi, I can't. I just cannot drink it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so strong. And likewise with tea and coffee.
Yeah.
I don't have sugar in either of those. And in the circumstances where somehow a spoon or two got put in there, not unexpectedly, I just can't drink it. It's just my palate won't handle that sweetness. Yeah,
so. Sure. I mean, for me, I used to be, again, 2 sugars in coffee. And then when I married Eunice, that all stopped. And she actually cut out sugar altogether. And I pleaded with her for about 2 years, please, could I just have a little bit of sugar? So she's now got me on those sweeteners. So I have 1 sweetener.
Are you sure that wasn't code for something else, Paul? Can I have a little bit of sugar? That's why you didn't get any, right?
Yeah. You got 1 track mind. But anyway, so if you are able to locate some of the natural, the sort of necessary ingredient to keep the dude going when he's across here. Yeah. So
I'm a bit fearful, to be honest, but we'll try our best, right?
I'm sure that
he might be. Hey, let's just hope his flight's not delayed, right?
Yeah.
Or that the hostess doesn't spill some food on him, or the guy who sits next to him on the plane doesn't snore, or one of those just normal things that happen when you're traveling on an aircraft.
Yeah.
We'll hear the whining long after the engines have switched off.
Yes. I mean, he's still moaning about Chicago.
Oh no.
Dear.
America's got probably the best airport air network in the world by a long shot, right? It's fantastic, the number of airports and things they have there. So should be grateful to be in the country that's so successful at doing those things. So a little delay in Chicago, just see it as a holiday. It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
But,
I do worry that when it comes to Erekose, his geography is rather limited. And I'll give you an example. He definitely is of the opinion that Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide are mere suburbs of Sydney. Can you please put it into some sort of perspective as to, in distance? I know that Sydney is a huge city. It's the population of Sydney is pretty close to the same as Scotland.
Yeah,
And of course, with it being on the coast, it extends westward, outwards for, is it about 70 kilometres?
About
Into the suburbs?
it's about, yeah, so Sydney's on the coast, it's on the east coast. So the Pacific Ocean is one boundary of the city. It's only about, from the CBD, it's probably only about 7 or 8, maybe 10 kilometres to the coast. Perhaps not even that far. But then it spreads west about, I think, maybe about 40 or 50 kilometres,
right,
to the base of a mountain range called the Blue Mountains.
Yep.
An area called Penrith, and then it spreads north about 25 kilometres and south about similar distance. And it's geographically locked into mountain ranges and parks and things on north and south, and to the west, and obviously the ocean to the east. So it's a big sprawl. The actual centre of Sydney, the CBD area, which most people are familiar with with all the iconic pictures of the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge and so on. There's a good number of people that live in there as well, of course. Australia wasn't always much of a living city until probably the last 30 years. People tended to live in single dwelling homes out in the burbs. But it's more and more apartment blocks in the city these days, or renovated older buildings. But anyway, I'm just going to have a guess out here without knowing. I'd say about 15 to 20% of the people of Sydney live in the immediate central business area and within a few kilometres of that, and the balance live outside of that area. So it's a big city, to answer your question.
And then you've got Brisbane. Is Brisbane north or south of Sydney?
North. I was there yesterday. Actually, I was there this morning.
Right.
So it's just up the road. It's an hour and 15 minutes flying time. So it's about, Sydney to Brisbane to drive, it's about 10 hours. I think distance about 750 kilometres or 800 kilometres or something like that. And it's similar south to Melbourne as well.
Well, at that sort of distance, you're talking about going from one end of the UK to the other.
Absolutely. That's right.
And then Melbourne is south of Sydney, isn't it? It's sort of
correct.
South and off to the side.
Yeah, it's south, and it's a little bit further west. If you run a line down, it's probably the equivalent of about, I don't know, half an hour further west, if I can call it that, in terms of a timeline. But we run on the same time zone. So because it ducks around the bottom of Australia, or at least the bottom of the mainland, it also has a border with the Bass Strait, and it sits on a bay. Melbourne sits on a bay called Port Phillip Bay, and from that bay runs out to an area of body of water called Bass Strait, which is the body of water between the bottom of Victoria, which is the state that Melbourne is in, and Tasmania, which is another state, and of course Tasmania is an island. So
and they've got a devil there called the Tasmanian devil.
They do.
Yes,
he's quite a nasty little creature too, but still very prevalent. There has been it's been the subject of some disease that they've been trying to eradicate for it, because it's sort of like a self-destructive disease. I can't think of technically what that is, but it's a cute little critter, but you wouldn't want to get bitten by it. So no, unfortunately
they've had some fires there recently, haven't they? I've been watching.
Oh yes, there's been a lot of fires in Australia. A lot in Victoria and Queensland. So
and then I believe Adelaide is further west again.
It is. Adelaide is. I tend to measure things in flying time. It's probably about an hour and 45 minutes further west from Sydney. I guess in distance, that's probably about 1,200 kilometres or 1,500 kilometres away, and all the way across to Perth, which is the other big city, which is on a good day, it's probably 4 hours flying over to Perth.
Right.
It would be close on 2,500 to 3,000 kilometres to get over there. So,
certainly the cities that I'm aware of are, as you say, Perth on the west, because I've got a friend there, another guy called Paul that stays there that I've known for many years. Obviously, Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. What's the capital of Tasmania?
Hobart.
Hobart, of course it is. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other major city that I've heard about, Darwin, is
Darwin is the capital city of. It's not actually its own state. It's a regional. It's called a territory.
Yeah.
And the reason it's not its own state, it doesn't have an adequate, sufficient population. Because in in Australia, the states have certain states' rights, and they're equal rights, and irrespective of the number of people who live in them. So the Northern Territory, which is physically a very large piece of land, and where the famous Ayers Rock is, and other such things. I think the total population of the territory is only about 350,000, or maybe 400. So it actually has its own government, but it's still under the, if you like, the ultimate purview of the federal government in Canberra. But the capital city of that area is Darwin, and named after Charles Darwin.
Charles Darwin, yeah.
So, yeah.
And another famous place is Alice Springs.
Yes, Alice Springs is in the Northern Territory, where I've just been speaking about.
Right.
And it's probably the largest inland city of the Northern Territory, and most people pass through there on their way to Ayers Rock, which is an iconic landmark for Australia too.
Yeah, one of my favourite films is, as I mentioned earlier, that Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Is that not where they end up? They end up going to Alice Springs.
It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, and actually stage show as well.
Yeah.
It might be Alice Springs that end up, but forgive me, I might have it wrong. I'm sure the movie buffs out there are going to be screaming at me if I get it wrong, but I think you're right. It's certainly a desert environment. So
yeah. No, I particularly enjoyed that film. I get the impression that the dude thinks that we're going to somehow recreate that particular road trip while we're there, as if we've got time to do loads of things, But
we could do that. I could see him in lipstick and a skirt and
yes,
blowing in the breeze,
Well, if he doesn't get this passport, Mrs. Doubtfire, here we come.
Exactly. Erica is a dude of the desert. That's what we'll call it.
Yes.
Dude of the desert. There we go.
Oh dear. So anyway, in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, I'm going to mention one of my favourite iconic scenes where the bar owner that ends up joining them in the bus falls for one of the drag queens. Decides to join them, but we have a bar scene where his wife, who is from, say, Southeast Asia, gets up and does her routine after the drag queens have done their routine. She gets up to really bring the house down with her party trick. And it sort of struck me that there's this guy that runs a bar, and he's got this wife, and she's not very good at anything else, but she's got this one party trick. And it just reminds me of Judge Angela Sukowicz. She's a useless judge, but there must be some sort of party trick that she can do similar to that, surely.
Oh, my God. Where do I take that? Where do I take that comment?
I don't know. She's incredible. I sent you an article.
You did.
A very recent article. You found some of the things interesting. Would you like to share any of that with us?
Yeah. So, our followers would be aware of the petition that's going around at the moment, asking for Judge Sukowicz to be removed from the circuit court case dealing with Stephen. And I'll come back to that in a second. But there's also this article talks about that petition, which I understand at the moment is close to 12,000 signatures, only been going less than a week, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm sure some people have their more colourful comments to make. It's not a question of any personal vendetta against her as an individual, but it's about her role as a justice and the importance that justices uphold the justice system in a fair, impartial, and independent manner. And unfortunately for the system and for Stephen, that Judge Suka, which is, sorry if I get her pronunciation incorrect, but her compromised in terms of her ability to be impartial in the upcoming review of the material that's before her. And irrespective of what I might think, or you might think, or 12,000 other people might think, she should, as a proper and appropriate person, someone whose primary focus should be on upholding the system of justice, which includes eliminating perceived and actual conflicts, should put a hand up and say, I don't think I can genuinely be independent in this matter. And this article kind of just, I don't know who the author of it was, but it just came out of and raised all those issues in a much more articulate manner than I can, and quoting statute obligations of a judge in regard to independence and so on, and basically stated that Judge Sukowicz is in a position where she should step aside, not because she's a bad person, but because she's not in a position of independence. Mm-hmm. And sadly, her behaviour in the past, for a long period of time, is in support of that proposition that she's not independent. She would be acting in a position of conflict, and to do so will undermine, irrespective of anything else, will undermine the confidence in the judicial system that sadly and desperately needs people to feel it being restored. And that would be good for the case, and it would be good for the justice system. It would be good for Wisconsin to have an independent person in there who has no prior involvement in the Stephen Avery and related matters.
Yeah, thanks. Is there? I might have this totally wrong. Is there something to do with the fact that back in, was it around about 2013, she was dealing with Stephen Avery's sort of appeals. Have I got that right? Whilst at the same time, she was the same judge that was dealing with the Holbachs taking out a civil suit against Stephen Avery. Now, what they thought they were going to achieve by doing that, I've no idea.
Yes, well, that civil suit was initiated by the Holbachs even prior to the criminal trial starting. I mean, go figure that.
Yeah.
Why would you? The man hasn't even been found guilty, and you're taking out a civil suit against him for wrongful death.
Yep.
I mean, talk about being preemptive. But in any event, we obviously know what happened in the criminal case, and Stephen was found guilty. But throughout, when Stephen had gotten through his, if you like, court-appointed defending attorneys, he represented himself in a number of matters with the help of Sandra Greenman, that is. And there came a point in, I think, 2013 or 14, somewhere in there, that both the Holbach family had made a decision that they wanted to drop the civil suit, and both they and Stephen, who was representing himself, made application to the court under Justice Sukowicz's authority to dismiss the matter, and she wouldn't. Mm-hmm. Even though the parties wanted it dismissed, she didn't allow it to be dismissed. I don't know whether she did that actively or just by silence, or by, being, just not doing anything. Mm-hmm. So much so that Stephen ended up having to petition the Court of Appeals because of this matter, and the Court of Appeals ordered Judge Sukowicz to, finish the matter off because the parties were in agreement with that. So clearly, I think, in fairness, and if someone wants to tell me I'm 1,000% wrong, I'm happy to take the arrow. But clearly, the only reason why Judge Sukowicz would have delayed or not assented to the parties' wishes is if she had a view, and this is what's brought out in the article, if she had a view that that Stephen Avery was guilty and that the plaintiffs, in this case the Hallbachs, should pursue this civil case. In other words, she was taking a personal view about Stephen's guilt, and that's totally improper for a judge to do. The judge's role is to administer the justice process. Okay, if it's a jury-based matter, then once the jury's determined guilt, the judge's role to determine sentencing. But it was clear from Judge Sukawicz's behaviour back in those years, I think 2013 to 2015, somewhere in there anyway, that she had not understood or wasn't prepared to adopt a independent and non-biased approach to a legal matter that needed to be, terminated. Mm-hmm. And there are other sort of, if you like, surrounding facts to do with her association with other relevant persons on the prosecution side of this case, but I'm not going to go to that matter, except to say that it's really important that judges be independent, and if they can't uphold those principles, which are very clearly outlined in their obligations, then they shouldn't be judges. That's the first thing. But secondly, if they're so, if you're like influenced or emotionally connected to a matter, they should stand aside. That is the proper and professional thing to do.
Sure, excellent. I think I don't know what happened to your picture, but we've still got. Oh, there you go. You're back again.
There you go. Good. Here I am.
Excellent. Yes, I don't know if you remember this, but a long time back, Carla Chase, fantastically, she came across loads and loads of newspapers dating between the, Stephen being released in 2003 and the trial in 2007, and she posted on the Facebook just about every day. There would be a new article. So I do remember that the reason why the Hallbachs took this civil suit against Steve was in retaliation for the fact that he had received this 400,000 from his civil suit, and it was purely designed. I mean, from my point of view, I could see it was purely designed to try and deprive him of that 400,000 that he had received in order to pay off Glyn and Kelly and Jerry and Dean, and so that he didn't have the funds to be able to try and defend himself.
Yes, I think that's pretty clear, because, I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to bring a civil case against someone who hasn't even had their day in court. I mean, seriously, if he'd been found not guilty, I mean, there would be a claim against the Hallbachs, right? Yep. For a whole host of reasons. So I think one of the Hallbach boys, the older one, is a lawyer as well, I think. Yeah. And whilst, I can't be sure, and I'm always a bit reluctant to be accusatorial about stuff I'm not 100% sure of, but it seemed fairly clear to me on an independent view that they were just trying to drain Stephen of resources to avoid him being able to appoint anyone other than a public defender for himself. Yeah. And all those sorts of associated issues. Thank God that matter didn't get any legs in the long run, but it does go to the heart. That behaviour goes to the heart of illustrating the kind of the vendetta there was against Stephen Avery at the time, and his the system's unwillingness to give him a fair go, which he deserves. Anyone deserves, not just Stephen. Anyone deserves. Anyway, so
excellent.
So great article.
Yeah,
it's on. Maybe you can post a link to that or something, Paul. So
I'll do it in the comments later on. Yeah.
And importantly for me, it quoted all the I guess the code of conduct type issues for judges, and so you have a very clear understanding of what their duties are. And when you read those codes of conduct, two things come out for me. One, how good the code is. It's perfect. That's exactly what you want to have happen. But sadly, how badly it's not applied.
Yes.
By certain judges. Certainly in Stephen and Brendan's cases, all the judges involved in this matter in the early days, especially, were, in my view, were very poor at what they did. Very poor. And I have some doubt. I could be wrong. I have some doubt about Judge Sukawicz's capacity her capacity to handle this matter. You know,
Yes.
she gave Kathleen Zellner submitted that 1,200-page motion. I won't go into the detail of it, and she gives this really cursory reply in half a dozen pages or so to matters. I mean, either that's a deliberate attempt to be disrespectful to the judicial review process, or her inability to make the effort and take the time to absorb all the material and come back with a considered and documented response. So, I mean, in my mind, could be wrong, I'd question her fundamental ability to handle a big matter like this.
Yeah. Which, for me, the big problem here has always been the media coverage at the time. It was a case of, it was this Stephen Avery that did it. Terrible crime, horrible crime, and it almost blinded people to any kind of presumption of innocence, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no one. I mean, what happened to Teresa, or at least what we think happened to her, is horrific.
Yeah.
You know, and if you take yourself back into that moment, you know, and not view what happened through the lens of knowing what we now know through Making a Murder and all that's followed, and you just go back into the moment and you see this story on the news that a young photographer of a local family has gone missing and ultimately deemed to have been murdered cruelly and in an awful way. Your natural human reaction would be to say, "Oh, dude, this is horrible. I hope they get the person or persons," right? And then, of course, Stephen's name gets thrown into the mix early on in those press interviews that Ken Kratz did. And so people just like to join the dots. Not, some, of course, like to join the dots because they don't like the person involved, but some will just join the dots because emotionally they want to feel that there's been a resolution or a coming to an end of an issue, even though the trial hasn't come up. And it's a really dangerous human thing to do. And I mean, I've been guilty of it in the past, not in the recent past, but in the past I've been quick to judge things like that and thinking, oh, well, sounds like that could be him or that could be her or what they're saying is right. Mm-hmm. And we need to be really careful not to be presumptuous about stuff just because people are different or you don't like them or they behave a little odd or even what the police tell us. I mean, we like to think what the police tell us is the truth. But sadly, we now know, not just in Stephen and Brendan's cases, that, you know, you have to have a healthy mistrust of what you hear from the police or the sheriffs and so on, or law enforcement generally, because the evidence is there that there's enough of them who will distort the truth for their own ends. And not only is that unfair to the person that's on the spot, you know, the victim and also the accused, but it's really, really unfair for the system of justice that needs us to have its trust.
Lovely. Just quickly moving on to another, getting back to Australia, and you're going to go in obviously and see Steve Driz and Laura Nyrider. You should absolutely love it. I met them in Edinburgh at the beginning of the year.
Yes,
and they are excellent speakers, and they very entertaining. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy them.
Actually, can I just add a little quick interesting little side story to that? In Sydney, that show is at a theatre in an inner city suburb called the Enmore Theatre. It's a really boutique sort of, I'm not sure when the theatre was first built, but it feels like it may be 100 years ago.
1903.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah. But it's kind of so iconic that a lot of, you know, when big artists come to Australia, they play at the big venues, you know, because that's where the money is. But I remember not that many years ago when the Rolling Stones were doing yet another tour of Australia, they actually went and played at the Enmore Theatre. Yeah. So I know Steve Driven is a bit of a music buff, and he should appreciate that he's on the same stage as Mick Jagger. Right? Yes. So Jumping Jack Steve, that's what we'll call him. Yeah. Or Jumping Steve Flash. Yeah. So,
although I suspect I suspect that with Drizzen and Nyrider, it won't be a case of the classic Rolling Stones line of "no snow, no show."
No, that's right.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine them being into that.
No.
But of course, you're also getting to see David Rudolph.
Yes, yes, yes.
Have you? Well, obviously, you've watched The Staircase. Have you ever met David Rudolph before?
No, I haven't.
No.
I'm really interested to listen to him because I've been thinking about going back and watching The Staircase again
Yeah.
of recent times. There's a lot of aspects of that that I really want to revisit in my mind.
Yeah.
I found his role, who he was a dedicated lawyer to Mr. Peterson,
Yeah.
but he also acknowledged in the very latter stages of that whole story how it was wearing him down.
Yes.
And I think that's a really honest emotion
Yes.
to put on the public on public display. So I'm really interested to hear what he has to say and about his experiences. So I'm sure that's going to be extremely rewarding for everyone who's there.
It came back to my recollection who it was that was the sister of Kathleen Peterson. It was Candace, wasn't it? And is that Candace?
Yes.
Zanini or something like that?
That's right.
And I thought that was I thought that was absolutely terrible that woman could get up and start spewing her rubbish like that.
I know that was the whole conduct of that thing was just bizarre. It was really bizarre. And even though the judge, whose name escapes me, I'm sure you're going to tell me straight away.
Hudson, what was
kind of, yeah. He sort of was quite forthcoming about errors, things he would do differently. But
Orlando Hudson.
Yes. But I'm thinking, you did him wrong the first time.
Yeah.
It's good that you sort of, on reflection, admitted that maybe he hadn't made the best decisions. But gee whiz, there's a lot of pain and suffering went on because of those bad decisions. So
again, partly fed by the media. I keep coming back to this. If the media were held more accountable for some of the things that they put out there. Well, I know for a fact that over there in Australia, had the Stephen Avery case been over there, there would have been no sweaty press conference.
If there was, it'd be declared a mistrial.
Yeah.
So, and that's the risk that the police take when they do things that, if their wish is to prosecute the perpetrator, in fairness to the family and the community and everyone else, if you actually go and do that and risk the presumption of innocence being destroyed, you've committed a crime yourself, in a sense, by letting someone off the hook, or potentially off the hook, that that shouldn't have been. So, and I'll go on about this until the day I die, and that is one of the fundamental weaknesses in the system, in justice systems, and certainly in the United States, is the immunity afforded prosecutors from ever being in trouble for doing anything wrong, short of, some major thing, is one of the problems. Because if Ken Kratz had been in any way fearful of his behaviour, of the things that he did, you can rest assured that he wouldn't have done them. Or he would have modified them in a way that would have restored some further degree of fairness back to Stephen Avery. And the fact that they just say these things and get away with it, and hardly anything ever happens to them, is part of what creates a lack of accountability for their conduct. And that, I'm a professional person. I'm accountable. If I do something wrong, I can get sued. I accept that. I think that's fair to the public. If I'm putting myself out there to do things and charging fees for it, and my actions affect other people, I should be accountable for my actions. Why on earth are prosecutors immune from these things? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my soapbox moment for this time. So.
Yeah. So really, just to look at the owl theory now.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but when we had a situation recently where a, a woman in Florida was found guilty of plotting the death of her husband and making it look as if an alligator had taken her, taken him.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yes.
I think I sent you the link to that one, did I?
I think I certainly know of this, so it's probably come through you. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a very interesting case of the the well, it was the close friend of the guy that was killed that had, along with his wife, had set this all up to make it look like. So I get the fact that, okay, crocodiles, yes, crocodiles, alligators, you can kind of see, yeah, you're going to get attacks off them regularly, I mean, in Africa, what was it? The line from Kill Bill, where in Africa, people die of attacks from, is it lions, elephants, and like mambas?
You know what the most dangerous animal in Africa is for killing people is? It's a hippopotamus. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
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 So, but yes, I guess, the issue about the owl theory, I mean, I can imagine that happening, by the way. I don't know whether it happened in that circumstance because I don't know enough about the logistics of where people were and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But an owl attacking someone is quite a possibility. Whether they attacked that person and caused injury to the head, and then the person went inside and collapsed or whatever and fell or whatever. They're all sort of circumstantial issues that I don't know enough about. But to me, it's not fanciful that that's a possibility. And albeit that it might be remote, it doesn't exclude it as possible.
And I think we, in a way, the world is thankful to a case in Australia back in, was it 1980? A very
1980, yes.
Very, very famous case.
Would you Lindy Chamberlain case?
Yeah. Would you like to just outline a little bit more of that for us?
Okay, so
you've got a book about it.
Well, there's many books about it. I actually have a book that was written by the person herself, Lindy Chamberlain. But I'll just try to be really concise about it, and then draw out the key issues that might have some sort of correlation to Stephen Avery's case. So Lindy Chamberlain and her husband were members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a very religious family, but a loving family. They had 2 sons, and Michael Chamberlain, her husband, was a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And Lindy had recently had a 3rd child, and the baby was very young, like just, I think maybe 6 months old, something like that. Mm-hmm. And the family went with other friends, went on a camping holiday out into the centre of Australia to Ayers Rock, which we were referring to before, and camped in a camping ground near the base of the rock. And during one evening, her youngest son, who I think might have been 2 or 3 at the time, and the baby, Azaria, her name was, the baby, were in the family tent, the baby in a little bassinet sleeping, and the boy, I forget his name now, but that doesn't matter. He was sleeping as well. So Michael Chamberlain, Lindy, and their oldest son, which I think might have been about 5, were with friends around the campfire. The tent was just maybe 10 yards away, 20 yards away. And Lindy heard a scream or a yelp or a kind of a cry. She went back to look at the tent and realized the baby was gone, and there were signs that a dog, she says, she saw a dog carrying her child out of the tent. And in fact, the dog is a dingo, which is a wild dog in Australia. It's a native dog, but it's wild. And they hang around caravan parks and other populated places because they're always looking for scraps or to steal stuff. They'll attack you if you're not careful, but they're not always that aggressive. And so the baby's gone missing. There was a coronial inquest into to the matter, and the coroner formed the view that the baby had been taken by a dingo, and there was no particular charges or concerns about the parents. But during that period, because Lindy and Michael were sort of a different style, and they were very open and willing to talk about what they saw and what happened, especially Lindy, because she was the one who gave the evidence. People started to form the view, but because she was a bit sort of matter-of-fact about this, that she must have done something with the baby, and they started to be very judgmental about her. She belonged to a church group. She was, in their minds, quite cold character. And also the Northern Territory Police, which is that region in the centre of Australia, were strongly criticised by the coroner of being incompetent at what they were doing, I guess I would suggest. And yeah, so they got a bit of a rocket from the coroner about their behaviour. And there was much speculation that the fact that this dog had taken a baby, that would affect the tourism of the Ayers Rock area, which was basically based on tourism. So I'll try to fast forward through. Then a second coronial inquiry got established, I think, maybe a year or so after that, I guess allegedly on new evidence. And out of that coronial inquiry was... can you hear me?
Sorry, I've just turned my mic off just momentarily while I reached across to get the heater because it's really cold in here with just my shirt on.
Right, well,
so you carry on. I can hear you. I can hear you fine. It's just like I muted my mic. Sorry to disturb you.
No worries. Without hearing any noise, I was just starting to wonder whether you were there. But anyway, so I won't try to make it too long because it'll just get too long. But the second coronial inquiry resulted, there was other evidence, and it resulted in Lindy, the mother, being committed to trial for the murder of her daughter. And I won't go into the detail because that's too much, but she went to trial. She was found guilty, notwithstanding that the judge pretty much had almost instructed the jury without being able to not to find her guilty. In other words, that the evidence didn't really support the claims. But throughout this process, which led up to, there was such a trial by the media about her that she was this kind of strange woman and a bit odd, and the husband was a bit odd, and they started to invent stuff about her and so on. Anyway, she got sent to jail.
Yep.
One of the things that Lindy Chamberlain had always maintained, that the baby was wearing a little crocheted matinee jacket.
Yep.
And that's what she was wearing. She was taken, and the prosecution said, no, you were lying about that. Anyway, she went to jail. She was actually pregnant a second time at the time of the trial. So she was in jail. She had to give birth to a baby while she was incarcerated. And then the baby was taken away from her, a fourth child, if you like. And I think the trial took place in 1982, if I'm correct. And then in 1985, a tourist who was wandering around Ayers Rock came across a person who had fallen and had died. And there was a police investigation about that. And during that investigation of the area where he had fallen off the rock and died, they found this item of clothing which proved to be the matinee jacket that Lindy Chamberlain had always said that her baby was wearing. And that the finding of that critical piece of evidence got her released from prison immediately. And that was in 1985, I think, if I have the date right. And then all the way through, she was then, not only was she released, she, in the end, the conviction was overturned. She was exonerated, but it took right up to 2012, which is a period of, 27 years to get the final piece of paper to say that she wasn't guilty of this thing. But anyway, look, the main point of mentioning all this was to say how the Australian public, were very quick to judge her because they didn't like her. They didn't like a lot of, I shouldn't say everyone, by the way, but a good enough number that the media caught on and went with that story. And even to this day, even though all the evidence is continually maintains that she never committed this crime, and you can see the movie. There's a movie made about it as well, starring Meryl Streep. But the public many of the public had locked in their mind that they were guilty, and they were too proud to let go of the fact that the truth revealed, as it always should have, that she was innocent. And the analogy I make to Stephen's case is, whilst the facts are very different, that a lot of people didn't like Stephen, so they're happy to convict him in the court of public opinion, including the media. And they didn't like because the Averys were just this regular family running a salvage yard, and for many people they weren't kind of in the right echelons of society, so they were dispensable as far as justice being fairly applied. And even now, notwithstanding all the evidence, and there's still a lot more to go in Stephen's circumstances and Brendan's, even though the evidence points clearly, as we always believe, to his innocence, there's still a good number of people out there, especially in Wisconsin, who aren't prepared to admit that maybe we got this wrong. Maybe we just got this wrong, and we didn't like Stephen Avery very much for whatever biased reason that was, but he does deserve justice to be equally applied. So anyway, sorry for the long story, everyone.
No, that was very interesting, and I think it's as you say, it was an iconic case. I remember hearing about it in the UK. It was a big...
it was a really interesting expose on Australian attitudes, and I think Australia has grown up a lot since then. I mean, not saying that those sorts of prejudging attitudes don't exist, but I think a lot of people learn a lot about themselves with that case. They made a movie about it in Australia. It was called Evil Angels. It starred Meryl Streep, and one of her early movies, but she was famous at that point.
Yeah.
Just realised what an amazing actress she is, to think that was back in that time.
Yep.
And it was called, I think, A Cry in the Dark in the US. But I'm sure you can go onto YouTube or one of those movie type channels and find it. And this book that I have here, which is a book that she wrote herself, or a biography about her ordeal, is a good read too. It's called Through My Eyes. So, fascinating case that caused a lot of pain to a lot of people, and a lot to remember about in terms of our own views about justice and it being administered.
Yes, I remember a video that I watched about the case, and the film, I believe, was 1988, and it showed you a news clip of the news people, because obviously when it was first aired in Australia, you had all the audience coming out, and they were being asked, well, did that change your opinion at all? No, she's still guilty.
Oh no!
A lot of people were of that opinion, and that's one of the things about Judge Sukovich. You almost imagine, in one of the articles I read, it said, well, even if there was a video, even if there was a video of them planning together, Kratz and Fassbender and Wiegert, to plant evidence and make sure that Stephen Avery went down, she still wouldn't have it that they'd done anything wrong. She is so against Steve. I
know this is a troubling thing. It really is troubling that people take this personal view. Justices and officers of the court, of which the DA is one as well, take this personal view to the process of justice. It's not a personal view; it's a process, and it's there. And if we can't honour and trust the process, the consequences can be quite dire. I mean, I know it sounds a bit kind of over the top and maybe sensationalizing, but just think about any law that we abide by in the UK and in Australia. We drive on the left-hand side of the road, right? Yep. Why do we do that? Not so much why we drive on the left, but why do we drive on an opposite side of the road to the cars coming the other way? Is it because the law says that we must stay in our lane? Well, maybe to a bit, but the main reason we do that and abide by a law is because we think it's fair. And the consequences of not having such a law would be chaos. If we don't have a system of justice that we can honour and trust and think is fair, we break down one of the core components to a civil society that enables us to feel comfortable when we walk on the streets, that if we get into strife, that we'll be treated fairly, and so on. I mean, it's just really, really, really essential that justices be competent, capable people bound to honour the process, irrespective of whether it's Adolf Hitler or whomever. There's a process. You must follow it, right? Because the system demands that it be honoured. And if you start manipulating it for your self-interest or your personal vendettas or whatever, you're not, firstly, the right person to be a judge, and secondly, you're putting the whole system at risk. And that's the problem with, I mean, it's an extreme example, and I'm not saying that totally is how I would describe Angela Sukowicz, but she is conflicted. And the problem is she either knows it and is not acknowledging it, or she's not smart enough to know it. Either is unacceptable. So
yeah, for me, and I might be totally wrong, but for me, I get the impression that judges in likes of Manitowoc and Sheboygan, they're small communities. They're quite small. I mean, the population of Manitowoc is only 80,000 for the whole county, but 30,000 in the actual city.
Yes, I think that's right. 35 in the city or something. So.
Yeah, Calumet's even smaller. I can't remember about Sheboygan, but you get the impression that there are these places where everybody involved in law enforcement and the legal system, they will all know Angela. They'll all probably like her because she's doing her utmost to keep Stephen Avery locked up. And I can't.
Paul, can you even? Yeah. I'm sure you accept this. Can you even hear the absurdity of that statement?
Yeah.
Right. They like her because she's keeping Stephen Avery locked up.
Yeah.
What has that got to do with justice?
Mm-hmm.
It should be nothing at all to do with Stephen Avery. It should be about the process of justice. Call him Bill Smith and talk about this, right? The fact that people in the justice system who we want to respect and honour, that will do a proper job, we should be able to feel comfortable that they get a fair go in the system, irrespective of the personality of the individual.
Yep.
You know, absolutely. And it boils my blood to think about Stephen and Brendan's case, and I'm sure it happens to many other prisoners.
Yep.
You know, and you've got prisons who are trying to do the right thing. You know, I guess mostly, you know, looking after prisoners in a respectful and supportive way, in the way prison systems are designed. I'm sure it doesn't always work that way all the time, but I'm sure the leaders of those organisations just trying to disperse their duty, but they need the system to be respected as well, right? And if the highest people's administering the justice, which are justices, aren't doing that, we undermine the whole system. Although in a ray of hope, the ruling by the appeal court judge, whose name just escaped me, from Paul Riley, was extremely encouraging. And irrespective of Stephen, just in the process, he honoured the process, and that's what I like to see.
Absolutely. I mean, I was going to say that when it comes to Judge Willis as well, we famously hear him saying, you know, addressing Stephen Avery as, you are probably the most dangerous, was it dangerous or evil person that has ever entered
dangerous,
that's ever entered this courtroom. And you just know that lines like that pamper to their small public, you know, to appease the population, to make it seem as if, you know, I'm the judge and I know, you know, that you're pleased that Stephen Avery has been found guilty, and I'm gonna treat him like this, you know.
And Judge Willis also made another statement in that same dissertation he was giving. He says, I think these are roughly his words. One of the things that troubles me about you, Mr. Avery, is that it seems your crimes have become increasingly severe as you've grown older. I mean, really? What crimes are we referring to? Stephen did commit some crimes, especially the issue about, forcing his cousin off the road and a few minor offences, all of which he was punished for and served his time when he was 20 or 18, 19, 20, 21. He hadn't committed any other crime in the meantime. So where was this increasing severity of his behaviour from age, 23 to age, I don't know, what he would have been 40, 2007, he would have been 44 or something, I think,
so,
when he went to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no evidence of that. That's just a false narrative about someone who's just been an everyday citizen, and let alone the fact that he was in prison wrongfully convicted. And where was the real independence of statements like that? Judges, in my opinion, shouldn't be making statements like that. So it was patently unprovable.
Yes, yeah, it's allowing their opinions to come in, isn't it? It's
not even an opinion.
It's not even a good opinion. Wrong. Yeah.
It's factually wrong.
Yeah.
Was he a criminal when he was in prison, wrongfully convicted for 18 years? Were they the 18 years he's describing that his crimes had got increasingly worse?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Seriously. I mean, it's just bizarre stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned, you've caused me to put down a little note here because of something you mentioned. And that is that one of the things that really struck me when I first decided that I wasn't just going to watch the documentary, I was going to find out a bit about it. And then I pulled over. I was over in Alston, which is not far to where we were when we went to Scott's View. We actually went through Alston, and I think, did we? Maybe not. Can't remember. And I remember pulling over and decided I'm going to phone this Sheriff Herman. And he spoke to me. He spoke to me, and I said, "What on earth is going on?" And he's like, "Oh, everything's fine here, Yeah, the documentary makes us look a bit bad, but it's just It's just for entertainment value. It's not." And there was no manning up to any kind of, even realizing, dude, this has really made Wisconsin and Manitowoc not just look bad. It's not just a case of looking bad and it's an image problem. You look bad because you are bad, but there was no manning up to what they'd done at all. It was like everything's fine. And I'm just going to carry blissfully on, and it's caused one or two issues. Sorry,
well, we know why that is, because they, with respect to Mr. Herman, the ills that beset the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department have a long history.
Yeah.
That are perpetuated by self-interested appointees following up the ladder. And many of whom are not qualified or have any experience in the jobs they're given, senior jobs.
Yeah.
And so are they going to admit, oh yeah, we've been screwing the system all these years? They're never going to admit to that, so they're just going to make up a story to fob you off and pretend it's just entertainment. To me, the somewhere high up, or I don't know whether it's an office of corruption or equivalent in Wisconsin, but or the Federal Bureau of Investigation, someone just needs to come in and say, this just can't continue, right? Forget about Stephen and Brendan's cases. I think they'll find their appropriate finalisation, but that none of that changes. Irrespective of Stephen and Brendan's cases, the problems that have caused what we know about those cases are systemic in the system there, and everyone, including all the great cops that must be there, undoubtedly the great majority of them are great people doing a good job, they deserve, and does the public and does the state of Wisconsin deserve, the restoration of trust in the criminal justice system and all those that administer it.
Well, that's truly our big hope, isn't it? That it will. Stephen Avery will be such a big case. Stephen Brendan, it'll be such a big Well, it already is a huge case. You've got people all over the world, certainly in all the English speaking countries and a lot of others besides. I'm going to chase up that Eric Ose, because I did ask him to send me again that list of the 50 different countries that he gets views from, because
Yes,
50 different countries have watched Eric Ose swigging
I think.
his Dr Pepper, and it's quite remarkable.
I think I saw on one of the Facebook support group pages a week or two ago a post that was done by Tracy Keogh from Melbourne,
Yep.
that pointed out the countries that had, participated or posted or whatever things, generally, irrespective of Thursday's page. And yes, I think that number of 50 or so was about the number that was there. And why are we interested in this? Just us, look, blonde me down under. Why am I interested in this?
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of injustices going in the world today. Why this one?
Yep.
Is because it's so patently unfair and obvious what's happened here, and we all can relate to that possibly being us.
Yep.
You might say, well, why, haven't you got enough problems in your own country to be an advocate for? Probably the answer is yes.
Yep.
But this is just so powerfully hit a nerve of so many people that you can't sit back and say, oh, well, that's someone else's problem. I love the United States. I have a long association with the country and great people.
Yep.
But this is a bad thing, and it needs to be spoken about. It needs to be redressed, not just for Stephen and Brendan as individuals and their families, but also for the good of the system overall. And the word or the expression I've heard myself use many times, sorry if I'm boring people who've heard me say this before, is that I don't see, with all its success and all its remarkable achievements, that the US has allowed its system of justice to properly evolve. Certainly not in a uniform pattern across the states. Perhaps there are some states that are more, advanced than others. But, when you and I both know in our countries, and we're not perfect by a long shot, that these cases would never find the light of day in a courtroom for what had happened. Why is that? And why does this one in Wisconsin and in Manitowoc County or Calumet, why is it allowed to proceed? Why was it allowed to proceed in this way? Mm-hmm. They're the really deeper questions that need to be answered and fixed. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that when I see Mr. Drizzen and Ms. Nyrider and Mr. Rudolph.
Yep. No, you just again mentioned something there. Why is the world taking such an interest in this? Quite simply because of the statement at the end of episode 10. Dear people of the world, my name is Brendan Dassey. Help me if you can. He wasn't just addressing that to people in Manitowoc or Wisconsin or America. Dear people of the world, please help me if you can.
Yeah, I think he actually says, "Dear people in the world."
Right? Yes. Yep.
Even that subtle word difference says to you a lot about the loving, caring, and decent boy and now man that Brendan is.
Yep.
And he's at a loss to know how this has happened to him, but he holds strength of himself and to his family who support him. And he's just uttering a pleading, say, help me if you can.
Yep.
And that pleading should have been a pleading and an answer right at moment one. Right at moment one, Brendan should have always had a lawyer or a responsible person or some advocate for his side of things present with him at all times, right? At all times. For a young boy at 16 years of age with intellectual challenges, the fact that didn't happen is the reason why he's in prison. Irrespective of the motives of the interviewers and the prosecution, let's just put them aside. The system should have protected Brendan, irrespective of the behaviour of the law enforcement officials. The system should have protected Brendan, both in terms of that those interviews should never been allowed to happen without a lawyer present, and if a competent lawyer was present, he would have simply said to Brendan on most of the questions, don't answer that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have had a confession. There's no physical evidence corroborating that so-called confession anyway, and Brendan would have never been brought to trial. And not only did it fail in allowing him to be interviewed in that way, but then Judge Fox allowed those so-called confessions into court. Yeah. He should never have allowed those confessions into court, because blind Freddie could tell you that they were improperly obtained. And in the interest of justice, he should have not allowed those confessions. And sure, that doesn't mean Brendan couldn't be prosecuted, right? He could have been prosecuted. Bring up the physical evidence that is the prosecution. Mm-hmm. Question him if he wants to, to give evidence at the court. There's other ways you can prosecute someone, but both the process that allowed him to be interviewed plus the way Judge Fox handled that matter, let alone the disgraceful behaviour of Kaczynski and O'Kelly, all that stuff, the process let Brendan down, and the United States and Wisconsin in particular have got a hell of a lot to answer for into their system for letting that happen to a young boy. And that's why we're so passionate about this issue, because we just can't help but yell about how unfair this is.
Yeah, and the one thing, I mean, we talk about Eric Ozee going off and moaning about lots of other things, but the one thing that really does get up his goat was AEDPA, and Luke Berg at the oral arguments just not even addressing the issue, just saying AEDPA. You can't do this, AEDPA. We're not going to discuss the merits of what happened here. AEDPA.
I mean, that's disingenuous. I mean, that's an expression that seems to be popular at the moment. It's, the fact that they're even having to go to that point to raise those issues. I mean, there's a piece of statute law that was designed to address issues to do with terrorism and the death penalty.
Yep.
And federal courts second guessing what the states courts wanted on death penalty matters and terrorism related matters, and opportunistically now using it to defeat habeas relief that every American citizen under the Constitution is entitled to. It was a rotten piece of legislation. It should be appealed or modified, and there should be some politicians with the fortitude to do that. Because again, the system of justice is the poorer for that piece of legislation. But you know what? It really boils my blood with the Supreme Court as well, because, the submissions that were made on Brendan's behalf by the Centre for Wrongful Convictions and all the amicus briefs were very powerful, intellectually, thoughtfully prepared submissions.
Yep.
And the only conclusion I can come to for them to not look at the case is they couldn't be bothered.
Yep.
Which is indictable in my view on its own merits. Or how could you possibly read those things, all of those things, and not consider this matter? No, this was a matter of fundamentally on the issue of the special care rules that were brought up in Supreme Court past rulings, I suppose you would say.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you take this on and make it really clear what special care was meant to mean? It wasn't meant that I knew what his age was, which Tom Fassbender would have you believe. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we knew what his age was. And Tom Fassbender was asked by that Dateline lady about Brendan's intellect, and Tom Fassbender says, I don't consider IQ. Really?
Yeah.
You don't consider IQ? And special care talks about understanding the needs of people with intellectual deficits. So anyway, I'm rambling, I apologise, but the point being is that I think the Supreme Court, really dropped the ball on that issue.
Yep.
And could have come up with some clear guiding issues for all courts of the United States, not just this matter we're dealing with.
Yep.
All courts. So people say special care should be prescriptive, which to me should be, there should be an independent assessment of the person. It should be documented about the nature of the person, and there should be a prescriptive checklist, if you like, of things that must happen to someone in those circumstances. And people like Tom Fassbender and Mark Wiggett should never have been allowed, if the proper special cares rules were applied, should never have been allowed to be let loose on Brendan the way they did, and abused his good nature and trust of law enforcement, and abused it to his own peril. And it was just a disgraceful bit of human behaviour. And it's really hard to forgive someone for that, irrespective of their sole motive, of course, was simply to convict Stephen Avery. They didn't care about Brendan.
Yep. So I'm not going to keep you any longer, because it'll be nearly just gone 11 o'clock over there for you. I'm
11, yes.
Yeah, yes. Yep. I'm obviously looking forward to coming across and seeing you. Yep. And I mean, I must admit, I like the looks of one of the items you've got on the itinerary. I don't know how Eric Hose is going to get on with this, but the bareback kangaroo riding, I think that sounds very, very looking forward to that.
Normal. Yeah. Of course, that when you're young kids at school in Australia, it's very common to have kangaroos to ride to school on. Yep. The female kangaroos are a bit more popular than the guy kangaroos, because they've got a little pouch at the front and you put school books there, right? Yep. So that makes them more popular. And alligator wrestling.
Yes.
We have all those sorts of things in Australia. I'm sure it'll be quite a worldly experience for Mr. Kose when he comes across. Yes. Hey, I wanted to mention one other thing. I read this book back at Christmas time, and I'm in the midst of reading it a second time. As you can see from my little bookmark, I'm getting close to halfway through the second time.
Yep.
This is a wonderful book. There's a few funny little bits that are a bit odd in here, but this is a great deep insight to a lot of surrounding environmental issues. I don't mean the physical environment, I mean the social and political environmental issues of Manitowoc. So if you haven't already got this book, it's really something you should get or pinch from someone who has. There's much to learn about these cases and why we are where we are today.
Yep.
You have a read of this. Thoroughly recommend it.
Well, I'll certainly be having a read of this on the flight over again. And
it's about a 24-hour book. So should be perfect.
Slightly longer for me.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember, it took me 6 months to figure this thing out.
That's right. So, but I'm really looking forward to having you in Australia, Paul.
Yeah.
And obviously, one of the missions is not just for yours and mine and Eric Kose's entertainment, but we want to speak to the Australian supporters.
Yeah.
Get their views on things. I'm sure Mr. Kose will be busy with his microphone and his camera.
Yep.
Speaking to people. And the groundswell of support for these cases is huge in Australia, huge. And I noticed, as I think I said on another thing the other night, it's really started doubled up in the last 4 or 5 months. So, it's very encouraging.
Yep, absolutely. It's really looking forward to it. And well, as you say, the support from around the world is it's heartwarming. It's necessary, and it's already started to make a difference, hasn't it? 10,000 people.
I know. In less than a week.
Was it TikTok Manicprop that started that?
I'm not sure who did that.
But certainly, I saw it, and when I signed, it was about 2,500 people. Certainly, I tweeted it, and I'm not claiming that 10,000 signed it because of my tweets. Definitely not. But to get up to 12,000, it's just something that's gonna grow and grow and grow. And
if you actually go to the petition itself, if it comes past your Facebook page and your petition, it has the counter on it, right? That shows how many people have signed it. And seriously, it just keeps ticking while you're looking at it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it's like, Barack Obama or the Dalai Lama or someone has tweeted. It just
Yeah.
keeps ticking and ticking and ticking. So that doesn't happen by chance, I can tell you that.
No. And what's
So,
interesting is that, whereas the petition to have Stephen Avery pardoned, that's a very simple thing. But it shows how many people are well up to speed with the case and know exactly what's going on. Why would some people would think, well, why would you want a judge to be removed from a case? Judges are judges, they're fair people. But 12,000 people know that's not the case.
yeah, and hopefully, I'm not sure who's ultimately in charge of these judges, probably the AG, I guess. But there should be a process of reviewing her suitability for this particular case.
Yep.
And if they're genuine about wanting to administer justice, they should make sure that that all the potential perceived or otherwise conflicts are removed, and because it could jeopardize the process going on. So it's in everyone's interest that
Yep.
that someone independent and without a conflict be appointed to this matter in the circuit court.
Well, we look forward to obviously Zyla filing her brief, Zelna filing her brief either Thursday or Friday.
Yes.
Look forward to a bit more Eric Jose on Making a Murderer, of which he is very, very good and very lucid. I think is one of his favourite words when it comes
Right.
to Making a Murderer. Hopefully he'll stick to that and not go talking about things that he clearly has.
I seriously, I've said this before, I seriously don't know how he does all that he does.
Yeah.
It's just, I can only put it down to obviously not only the obvious passion and intellectual commitment to the detail, but it's got to have a lot to do with Dr. Pepper, don't you think? So, because I don't know how he stays up.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's the combination of the Dr. Pepper and the Captain Crunch cereal.
Right.
I think that's it. Yeah, and the fact that they have a different type of weather where he is.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my God! Don't get me on that thing.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Look, I'm just going to finish. I got to finish. I'll tell you why that comment came up, because you know how there's these little annoying things that people say over time and they become common usage, right? So why this has arisen for me is because I do a lot of traveling and I fly a lot. And I get really annoyed when pilots say, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're on our way to Singapore.
Yep.
The radar suggests that we're going to experience some weather along the way, but don't worry, it won't be too bad. I think, really? Isn't weather always there? Isn't it? I mean, don't you really want to say we're going to see? It's like, oh, really? Where did someone turn good or bad weather into just weather?
Yeah,
meaning bad weather.
Yeah,
it's just one of those quirky things that evolve or experience some weather. I mean, like saying experience some breathing, right?
Yes, yes.
Anyway, so that's why I made that comment about that.
I loved it. I loved it because I was thinking exactly the same myself. It's like, well, it's weather already. Anyway, I'm going to say cheerio because I better go off and do another lesson and enjoy your evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for listening, and looking forward to welcoming you down under in a couple of weeks.
Yep, absolutely. But we'll have another chat before then, possibly.
Okay. All the best, my friend.
And you. Catch you soon.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.